learning how to make a shelter in the bush. I mean, there is, within the learning theories, there's a guy called Maslow who said there are three main needs for people: warmth, shelter, and food. So if we can help children to learn to identify what are the edible plants within the natural environment, what are the areas that are great that you can set up your own little shelter should you need that, and also how to create your own campfire using a tool called steel flints rather than matches, because we know that when you've gone out into the bush, I'm sure you've known that if you take your matches with you on a day that is wet, you're going to lose those. So we try and find different ways of showing the children how to care for themselves within the environment. It's always, we're looking at the risk versus the benefit for children.
It's just so great. We've got a panel here, Joe. I can recall Nalini spending half the night in the bush. This is from school. I was absolutely scared, frightened, couldn't light a fire, couldn't do a jolly thing. Great skills here, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, would I know how to light a fire without matches anymore? Great. No, this is fantastic. And is there growing interest in what you offer?
Yes, definitely. And so we now have 3 locations in the Hearts area and in Wellington region. So we are looking at bringing on board children from different families, different backgrounds, definitely trying to get children away from devices, because as a previous preschool teacher, I could see the detrimental effect it was having on the brains of children, that we have had so much screen time for children now that actually there's a loss of creativity, there's a loss of some of the brain development that's going to be so important for them, not just at school but for life.
Yeah, no, indeed. Selwyn Manning, can you light a fire without a pack of matches?
Oh, I'd really struggle. Definitely would struggle. So I think this is just wonderful, Joe. My thing on this is basically just a question back to you. What do you see are the differences on the faces of the kids when they've been behind a screen for too long, and when they're out doing something like what you and your team are providing?
You've just got 20 seconds, Joe.
Okay, so basically, for me, it comes down to children being able to understand what they're doing. So there is a lot more of a sense of achievement when they're able to come, they're off the devices, they're learning about these different activities and experiences that are developing them as people.
Here, Joe. Lovely to have you on, and really great to have you both on today. Nalini Baruch and Selwyn Manning. Kia ora. Wonderful stuff.
Thanks,
stay with RNZ for Checkpoint with Lisa Owen. I will see you tomorrow. You know the time, 3:45.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, I don't believe she is alive. The devastating words of the detective leading the search for a missing Christchurch real estate agent. Every day it influences your decisions, from do I need a raincoat to life and death calls. Now Aotearoa's weather forecasting system is being reviewed. We talk to the minister in charge. Trailer trash. The Hamilton Council wants your help identifying 2 people snapped illegally dumping rubbish. Could the College Hill sinkhole gobble up businesses as well as the road? And we talk to a teenage hero awarded a bravery medal for saving his little brother. You can watch us live on Freeview Channel 50 or on the RNZ website.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The police do not believe a missing Christchurch real estate agent is still alive and have launched a homicide investigation. 44-year-old mother Yenfei Bao was last seen door-knocking in the suburb of Wigram a week ago. The police have been searching a stretch of the Horswell River near Green Park today using inflatable boats. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves says they have informed her family.
As the week has progressed, and in particular developments over the last couple of days, we are now launching a homicide investigation.
So she is no longer alive?
I do not believe she is alive.
Nicola Reeves says she believes Ms Bauer was killed last Wednesday, July the 19th, between 12:30 in the afternoon and shortly before 11 o'clock at night. A 52-year-old man has been charged with kidnapping Ms Bauer, but the police have not ruled out further charges. The Deputy Prime Minister is refusing to be drawn on reports of a leak out of Labour's caucus meeting yesterday. The Post is reporting a first-term MP was visibly emotional during a frank discussion about MP Kitty Allen during the closed-door meeting. The MP is reported to have told the meeting they had been bullied and yelled at by Ms Allen, but thought it was the price to pay to get decent policy through. Carmel Sepuloni wouldn't confirm or deny the report, but says she's confident Labour's caucus understands the need for discipline. A defence lawyer for Lauren Dickerson told the court she was severely mentally unwell on the night she killed her 3 daughters and did it out of love. Mrs Dickerson is on trial in Christchurch for the murder of her 2-year-old twins and her 6-year-old in Timaru in 2021. She denies the charges, arguing insanity and infanticide. Defence lawyer Anne Tui told the court Mrs Dickerson was battling a serious depressive disorder, and the night she killed her children and tried to take her own life, in her mind she was doing it out of love.
Lauren said to psychiatrists that she did not want to leave her children without a mum. She also wanted to save her children from suffering from her being such a bad mother.
The Crown argues Mrs Dickerson acted out of frustration, despair and tiredness and knew her actions were morally wrong. Auckland Council says businesses affected by the large sinkhole in the central city may get financial aid if they can prove it's cost them business. The century-old pipe causing the sinkhole was slated for replacement next month, but gave way amid recent heavy rain. Now, construction crews have redirected traffic in the centre of College Hill and will remain until the pipe is fixed in 4 months' time. Healthy Waters head Andrew Chin says businesses on College Hill may be entitled to financial aid, although he doesn't think the work will have too much of an impact.
We'll be endeavouring to keep both sides of the street open, so we don't envisage that there should be any business loss for this, but if they can demonstrate they've been negatively impacted because of the construction, we'll absolutely consider it as part of the consent process.
Replacement work on the pipe is expected to start on Monday. And Prime Minister Chris Hipkins and his Australian counterpart have agreed to work towards seamless travel across the Tasman by establishing a joint expert group. The pair met in Wellington today for bilateral talks. They also discussed a commitment to refresh the Australia Aotearoa New Zealand Indigenous collaboration arrangement, as well as a bilateral roadmap. Chris Hipkins says the pair both want measures that would help trans-Tasman business and tourism.
Prime Minister Albanese and I committed today to revitalise the joint working group on initiatives to move closer towards seamless travel across the Tasman. We've asked that working group to report back by the 30th of June next year on additional steps that we can take to continue to improve that pathway.
Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will arrive in New Zealand this evening. To sport now, and the Wallabies' shaky start to the year hasn't stopped coach Eddie Jones from firing a broadside at the unbeaten All Blacks ahead of this weekend's Bledisloe Cup opener in Melbourne. New Zealand have had big wins over Argentina and the Springboks, while the Wallabies have suffered 2 straight losses in the Rugby Championship. Jones believes the All Blacks are taking a different approach to this year's World Cup than they have in the past, and that could play into the Wallabies' hands.
In a World Cup year, they tend to have a measured build-up, and it looks like they're all guns firing at the moment. And our aim is to put them under pressure early in the game. Put them under pressure and see how they cope with pressure on them, because they haven't had it as yet.
The All Blacks can retain the Rugby Championship title along with the Bledisloe Cup with a win at the MCG on Saturday night. The Warriors centre Adam Pompey has re-signed on a new 2-year contract through to the end of the 2025 NRL season. Pompey's the only player this season to have played every minute of the side's 19 games. The Warriors are currently 3rd on the competition ladder but have a bye this week. The owner of English Premier League football side Tottenham Hotspur, Joe Lewis, has been charged by the US attorney with orchestrating a brazen insider trading scheme. The British billionaire has been accused of using inside information to shower gifts on his friends and lovers. And that's the news.
A loss for the country.
It doesn't matter how much possession it has, it doesn't matter how many shots you have on goal. What matters is the one that goes in the goal, and the one shot that the Philippines had went in.
A rise of the machines.
Will AI replace humans? I don't think it'll replace humans, but humans using AI will probably replace other humans.
The rhetoric ramps up ahead of Election Day.
A three-headed monster of Labour, the Greens to Pāti Māori will be inherently incredibly unstable.
Straight talk every day, morning report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, also Coromandel, Taupō and Taumaranui mainly fine. Showers about Taranaki and Waitomo, Auckland and Northland easing. Showers increasing tomorrow morning with isolated thunderstorms possible. Bay of Plenty fine with a few showers tomorrow. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Showers some heavy with thunderstorms possible in the west tomorrow morning. Snow above 800 metres. Nelson, Buller and Westland mainly fine. Showers developing tonight, some possibly thundery, then clearing tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago mostly fine. The odd shower at times. Rain developing about southern Marlborough tomorrow night with snow above 600 metres. The remainder of Otago, Fiordland and Southland, cloud increasing. Occasional rain or showers from this evening. Some heavy with thunderstorms possible about Fiordland. Snow lowering to 500 metres overnight. And for the Chatham Islands, showers easing tomorrow. RNZ National, it is 5:07 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Nā mihi, Anna. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Police do not believe missing Christchurch real estate agent Young Fei Bao is alive. It's a week since the 44-year-old was last seen while door-knocking potential clients in the suburb of Wigram. Today, police launched a homicide inquiry, calling in a dive squad to search the Hallswell River. Reporter Liu Chen and cameraman Nathan McKinnon are in nearby Green Park, where police are also searching and filed this story.
Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves confirming Yan Fei Bao's friends and family's worst fears.
I do not believe she is alive.
Nicola Reeves says the police told her family the news today.
Probably the words that they most definitely did not want us to come and tell them. Devastated. Yeah. They are being supported by police and victim support, and they have friends and family wrapped around them.
The dive squad today searched the Hallswell River, which snakes its way through farmland and communities, and cordoned off Neils Road near Green Park. Green Park resident Chelsea Norton says the river has been so high recently it partially closed roads. She believes if a body is there, it's unlikely it will be found.
Our farm that we're on at the moment, the paddocks are just absolutely, drenched of water. So I mean, if she was thrown into a river and ended up down here, I don't know if they'd find her for a while.
Chelsea Norton says it's a close-knit neighbourhood.
You wouldn't, want anything to happen to anyone in the community and round about here. So it would be very sad to think that if, someone had thrown her into a river and she's disappeared. It'd been, if they did find a body, closure for the family, but it's still pretty sad. You wouldn't want anyone to have anything like that happen to them.
Local resident Judith Geddes first noticed the police checking out the area last Thursday.
Well, I just know there's a lady missing and, it doesn't sound great.
Are you concerned about her safety?
Oh, definitely.
She says river is flowing fast, swollen by recent heavy rain.
The river has been quite high. It was a foot off the bridge last weekend, but it has dropped a little bit. It's very dirty.
The area police are searching is more than 20 kilometres away from a Wigram house where a forensic investigation is underway. Dean Geddes was milking the cows when the police called in and spoke to his wife.
No, they just asked my wife if she'd seen this car, so I don't know what that means.
He says it's a rural community, but it's not far away from Christchurch.
We're only 3 k's from Taitat, 4 k's from Lincoln, so we are rural, but we're pretty close to civilization.
Detective Reeves says police have received more than 170 pieces of information from members of the public. They are still seeking sightings of Ms. Bow's car, a silver Nissan Dualis, which was parked on Iroquois Place in Wigram, and a silver Mitsubishi sedan with a distinct yellow sticker with a kiwi on it on the boot found nearby. A 52-year-old man appeared in Christchurch District Court on Monday, charged with kidnapping Ms. Bow. Detective Reeves says the police are not ruling out further charges against the man in the future.
And if you were listening to that story on radio, you can look at the video version, which will be on our webpage. 11 minutes after 5, kia mau tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Kitty Allen saga is continuing to dog the Prime Minister, with a leak from Labour's caucus meeting yesterday revealing a frank and emotional exchange. The government is grappling to get back on message after its former Justice Minister was arrested and charged following a car crash on Sunday. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The last thing Labour needs right now is a leaky caucus.
I don't talk about anything that happens in caucus.
Look, I don't share the details of caucus meetings.
Our caucus discussions are confidential.
I would never talk about what happens in caucus and never do.
What is said in caucus is a matter for caucus.
A matter for caucus, now a matter of public record. The Post has reported an account of this week's MP's supposedly confidential meeting, describing it as a frank discussion about the events leading to Kitty Allen's downfall. An emotional first-term MP reportedly told colleagues, "We can't pretend we haven't known about this for 2 years." They said they'd been yelled at by Kitty Allen before, but thought it was the price to pay to get decent policy over the line.
An anonymous source comes out and says something happened. Why should we speak to that? That's hardly a reliable source.
But when confronted with the details, the former whip, now Minister, Kieran McAnulty, seemed to give the game away.
I mean, the leaks wouldn't have happened when I was whip.
A deadpan joke, he swiftly walked back.
There's usually the approach that what goes on in caucus isn't talked about, so I'm very surprised to hear that there's been a leak. I shouldn't have joked about this. It's actually quite a serious thing, and I'm disappointed to hear that it's happened.
It is a serious matter, and Labour should be taking it seriously. The party went through a long period of disunity in opposition, during which it faced a litany of leaks. It knows how corrosive they can be to caucus cohesion. National went through it too in 2020 under then leader Judith Collins.
It's a bit like a hole in a balloon, really, isn't it? It's sort of like it all comes out.
This Labour government is on its last legs. It's now a caretaker government.
The wheels have fallen off. This government's coming apart.
It's not the only new development bedeviling Labour. A newly appointed member of RNZ's board has quit after being given a telling off for voicing his views about Kitty Allen's resignation. Jason Ake, a former journalist, earlier posted on Facebook questioning why Ms Allen was brought back to work so soon. He was critical too of some of the reaction. He wrote, "When there's blood in the water, the sharks circle." The Deputy Prime Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, says his remarks were inappropriate given his role.
When you take up a position with a Crown entity, then there are rules with respect to what you can speak about or not, and so he's resigned now.
Jason Ake has declined to speak to RNZ, posting instead on Facebook, "Reporters, stop ringing me, I have mahi to do." He explains his decision, writing, "I didn't want to be a distraction. I wanted to leave with my principle and values intact, and on my terms."
They've got really important roles to play, and so the public need to have faith in them being impartial.
Jason Ake's resignation should end that headache for the government, but the leak is a bigger problem. Labour desperately needs to pull its MPs back in line, and quickly. The election's just 80 days away, and leaky ships tend to go down.
Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch there. What's happening with the weather is a huge part of people's everyday lives, with forecasts sometimes determining life and death decisions in emergencies, as was the case in recent extreme weather events. Today, the government announced a review of Aotearoa's forecasting system. It says there are 2 agencies that have critical capabilities, NIWA and Met Service, and the review will focus on future needs, improving and integrating forecasting systems. Well, joining me now is the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, Duncan Webb. Kia ora, Minister.
Kia ora, good to be here.
What problem are you trying to solve with this?
Oh, look, it's not so much a problem that we're trying to solve. What we're trying to make is a kind of future-ready organisation or organisations that provide not just forecasting systems but climate science as well. We think there's improvements that can be made given the fact that our weather is changing and the way it's forecasted and measured is changing as well.
So we're not fit for purpose right now?
Look, I think both Met Service and NIWA have done a really good job to date, but they recognise as well that there's gains to be made by better ability to cooperate and having a really good look at whether the structure that they're in is best for the job ahead.
Aren't they cooperating now as they should?
Well, I mean, one's an SOE, one's a Crown Research entity, and things like competition law make good collaboration trickier than it should be. So we do need to look at how we can achieve that better. Tell me more about that. What do you mean exactly? Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that the two can't kind of share information on the base for weather forecasting or other science. They can't agree to compete or not compete in the market. They can't slice the market up between them. They're both arms of government, and that seems, it seems a bit silly. But having said that, competition law is really important. So we want to have a look and make sure that we've got something that makes sense. So, Minister, is that relationship, or rather a lack of it, in terms of sharing everything in data, is that potentially putting New Zealanders at risk? Well, look, as I said, to date there hasn't been any significant problems. We think there's room for improvement. You're absolutely right in your intro to point out that good weather forecasting, good climate science has life and death impact. And so we want to make sure that there isn't a failure. We don't want to wait for one to happen before we start this work. But you've got two agencies at the moment who are basically competing against each other and in some cases duplicating material, haven't you? You're right, there is some overlap there, and that's been identified in the past, along with things like the accessibility of weather data by third parties and what that should cost, and that's why we want to have a really good look at it. We really want to crack into this and make sure that whatever comes out the other end of this review is really robust, has the best science, has the best people in it, and is doing the best job for New Zealand. I wonder, how would you characterise the relationship between those two agencies? Because in the past, there seems to be a level of toxicity. Would you think that that's fair? Well, look, as Minister for State and Enterprises, I'm responsible for the Met Service, and certainly I've sat down with them and talked through this. They have a memorandum of understanding that they work with. They have a relationship. They have people who work between the two organisations. That doesn't mean you like each other and you cooperate, Minister. So I'm not asking you what the paper says. I'm asking you what the reality is. Have they had at times an adversarial and potentially toxic relationship between these two agencies? Oh, look, I think saying toxic is putting it wildly too high, but like any family... So where would you put it, Minister? Oh, look, they're going to have grumbles between each other within a family. There's some tensions in the relationship. That's been well recognised and commented on by others, but that's why we're having a review. One of the reasons we're having this review. Okay, as you would agree, forecasting is becoming more and more essential as we're experiencing these extreme weather events. So I'm wondering, right now, when New Zealanders wake up in the morning and they think something's potentially going on with the weather, there could be a drama, there could be emergency, who should they be listening to? Should they listen to NIWA or should they listen to Met Service? Well, Met Service is the authorised provider of weather information to things like the National Emergency Management Agency, and that is their, one of their fundamental roles is being the weather advisor to government and government agencies. So ignore the NIWA forecast if you're a member of the public. Met Service is the gold star organisation for that. Well, it's the entity that government relies on for things like emergency management. I think that's really important. But I'm not going to undermine the fact that NIWA do good work in climate science and forecasting as well, and we want to make sure we leverage off that. But that's confusing, isn't it, Minister? That's confusing. When the chips are down and the water is rising, and we've been in these situations very recently with the weather events, people want to know who the go-to is, and there is confusion. You've got NIWA and Met Service, and it's kind of like, why don't you just call it? Well, these are the questions that the review is being set up to look at. And you're right that if there's confusion when people are at risk through adverse weather, that's a bad thing. We don't want that to happen. That's one of the questions I would expect the reviewer to have a good look at.
Minister, can you rule out these two organisations merging in some capacity?
Oh, I'm not ruling anything out. I'm going to take the advice of the reviewer. Any big changes, no doubt, the public will want to have a say on as well. But at the end of the day, the question is, how can we be best prepared for a changing climate, for adverse weather, extreme events? And if that means merging, and that's the advice that comes this way, we'll have a very good look at it.
Appreciate your time, Minister. That is the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, Duncan Webb there. Today, the government announced a review into Aotearoa's weather forecasting systems. Let us know your thoughts on that. Actually, text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A court has been told there is no question Lauren Dickerson was severely mentally unwell on the night she killed her 3 children and did it out of love. Mrs Dickerson is on trial in Christchurch for the murder of her 2-year-old twins, Carla and Maya, and 6-year-old Leone in Timaru in 2021. She denies the charges and her defence, arguing insanity and infanticide, opened its case today. Anna Sargent has been in court and a warning this story contains distressing content.
Defence lawyer Anne Tuhi told the court that the night Lauren Dickerson killed her children and tried to take her own life, in her mind she was doing it out of love.
All of the defence experts formed the view that Lauren had an altruistic motive. That means that Lauren killed her children out of love. In her mind, she was killing them out of love because she was killing herself and she did not want to leave her children behind.
Anne Tuhi says Mrs Dickerson was battling a serious depressive disorder. She says Mrs Dickerson's mental health steeply declined from July 2021 due to the riots and unrest in South Africa when the family were preparing to emigrate. She had also never fully recovered from her postpartum depression after childbirth.
Why did she kill her 3 beautiful girls who she fought for years to get through brutal IVF treatments? Her girls who she loved and protected. The answer is that Lauren was severely mentally unwell.
Anne Tuhi says Mrs Dickerson did not plan to kill her children and it was an impulsive decision.
Lauren said to psychiatrists that she did not want to leave her children without a mum. She also wanted to save her children from suffering from her being such a bad mother.
The court has heard from a close family member whose identity has been suppressed, who described Mrs Dickerson as an affectionate and involved parent who cared deeply about her children's safety. Their words have been revoiced.
She would help at school plays and sports days. For the girls, she would arrange incredible parties and fun activities for them. She really tried to make their lives as memory-filled and as fun-filled as possible. The girls had only the best of everything. She was very protective over them. They had the best of the best car seats on the market.
The Crown argues Mrs Dickerson acted out of frustration, despair and tiredness and knew her actions were morally wrong. The trial continues.
It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your thoughts on anything you've heard on the programme. Do let us know what you think of the government reviewing Aotearoa's weather forecasting systems. 2 agencies at the moment, NIWA and the Met Service. Any thoughts on what should happen with them? Our email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now. Anna, mina pita kōrero.
Thanks, Lisa. The search for missing Christchurch real estate agent Yanfei Bao is now a homicide inquiry. It's a week since the 44-year-old mother went missing while door-knocking in the suburb of Wigram. A 52-year-old man has been charged with kidnapping, and Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves, who is leading the inquiry, is not ruling out further charges. A day after announcing she is to step down at the election, former Cabinet Minister Kitty Allen remains in the headlines. A leak from the Labour caucus has a first-term MP saying Ms Allen yelled at and bullied them, but thought that was the price of getting policy through. And a newly appointed member of RNZ's board, former journalist Jason Ake, has resigned after publicly questioning the speed of Ms Allen's return to work. Lauren Dickerson's defence lawyer has told the High Court she was battling a serious depressive disorder and in her mind was acting out of love the night she killed her daughters and tried to take her own life. Mrs Dickerson denies murder in Timaru in 2021, arguing insanity and infanticide. The government's reviewing the country's weather forecasting system, including NIWA and the Met Service. The Minister of State-owned enterprises, Duncan Webb, told Checkpoint there was some overlap between the two and did not rule out a possible merger. And during talks in Wellington today, Prime Minister Chris Hipkins and his Australian counterpart, Anthony Albanese, announced a joint expert group to work towards seamless travel between the two countries. It will report in June 2024. Those are the headlines, Lisa.
Thank you, Anna. The football Ferns' loss to the Philippines has put the New Zealand side in a tough spot at the FIFA World Cup. However, with a game left to play in the group stages of the tournament, co-captain Rhea Percival believes all is not lost in their pursuit of getting to the knockout stages.
We've got one game left, anything can happen. I think the games have shown that all tournament and in all the groups, so the game can go either way, but we'll come out wanting to win and put on another good performance.
And we're joined now by sports reporter Felicity Reid. OK, Felicity, it's a bit like a Rubik's Cube, the sports version, bit complex, but what will it take for New Zealand to be guaranteed a spot in the last 16?
So only the top two teams from each group progress. So after last night, the Group A is quite wide open after those results. So none of the four teams in the Football Ferns group are actually guaranteed a spot at this point. So it all comes down to the Sunday night and the two games that are left to play in Group A. So that's New Zealand, Switzerland in Dunedin and the Philippines and Norway in Auckland. So both of those games kick off at the same time. So keep that in mind as I'm about to tell you the matrix of all the possible outcomes. If we think about it like this, there are 5 ways that New Zealand can progress to the next stage. So 3 of those just require us to win against Switzerland. If both games...
Oh, is that all?
If both games that are still to be played are a draw, so that's New Zealand, Switzerland ends in a draw, Norway, Philippines ends in a draw, New Zealand advance. If New Zealand, Switzerland's a draw, but Norway beat the Philippines, it comes down to goal differential. So that's basically if it's a 1-0 win for Norway, New Zealand advance, but if Norway win 2-1, New Zealand's draw must be a 1-1. So if you've managed to keep up there. So basically, if the Football Ferns lose, they've got no chance. If they win, they're through. And if it's a draw, we're all on the edge of our seat, making sure, switching between the channels, perhaps trying to decide what's happening.
Crikey, that's going to be a nail-biter. All right, I think I got that in part, if not all. Shall we move on to the Ferns, who seem to be flying under the radar ahead of the Netball World Cup, which starts in just 2 days' time? Yeah, with all of the football fever flying around at the moment, the Silver Ferns are actually in South Africa currently, and they're about to defend their World Cup title. They have gone under the radar a little bit and maybe haven't got the attention that a World Cup title defence might normally get. They do start their tournament against Trinidad and Tobago on Friday night, so that's a game that the Silver Ferns are expected to win. They've taken a squad over for this tournament as well that's a little bit different to the squad that they had for the last big tournament, which was the Commonwealth Games last year. That was the tournament where they finished with bronze, and perhaps we're all looking at them maybe thinking what would actually come around once this World Cup starts. And so there are 3 players that have come back with quite a bit of experience. That's Amelia-Ann Ignazio, Karen Berger and Jane Watson. So they come into the side that weren't available for the Commonwealth Games. And with that, other teams and those overseas commentators are actually keeping quite an eye on the Silver Ferns. And former England Roses coach Tracy Neville says the coach Dame Nolene Tauroa, who took the side to the world title 4 years ago, she could actually be the difference.
She's very, very good at moving chess pieces and playing the right players and the right team at the right time and bringing in the players that can do actually a role for her. And I think that's where her added strength is exceptional.
So maybe we will have to be keeping quite a close eye on what the Silver Ferns are up to as well.
Thank you, Felicity. Felicity Reid there with our sports news. Hamilton Council's outed a pair of illegal rubbish dumpers, releasing a photo of a man and a woman offloading a trailer load full of trash under the cover of darkness. And they're appealing for people to help identify them. Illegal dumping is a messy and costly business. And joining us now is Tanya Herman, the Council's Sustainable Resource Recovery Unit Manager. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. It's a reasonably big step, putting out a photo of these people. I mean, what made you decide that you were going to do that? Have you had a gutsful?
Yeah, we have. Look, it's not good enough for our city, and we expect more from our residents, and our residents expect more as well. So we really want this type of behaviour to be stopped. So that's why we've made this a bit of an issue.
Tell us what you could see and what happened in this case.
So it was the early hours of last Wednesday morning. We had a trailer go down a back entranceway to one of our libraries, actually, and proceeded to dump a whole lot of rubbish. And then as they left, they had the tail bar down of the trailer and left quite a trail of a few metres of more rubbish and recycling. So it was really unsightly and not very good.
What kind of stuff did they dump?
So there was a few rubbish bags, and there was also some recyclable goods that actually could have been taken to a reuse store to be used for another purpose that another family could have used.
What do you mean, like, Tanya? Like furniture or something? Or
Yeah, so there was some baby furniture, there was clothing, there was shoes, and there was just general household items as well. So quite a mixture of items that we found.
And what have you found out so far about this situation?
So we've actually found out that since we've gone open with this and investigated it further, that the trailer was actually stolen from a property, and that the residents who had filled the trailer had the best intention of taking the trailer to the landfill and to also recycling areas. So these people had stolen the trailer and dumped the rubbish, but police have since recovered the trailer and are now working with the owners to return it to them.
Right, and so you've put out a photo, and if people know anything or can tell you who this pair is, you want them to get in touch, yeah?
Absolutely, because we want these types of behaviours, whether it's a one-off or it's because of the fact they wanted the trailer, or whether it's something that's ongoing. We want these behaviours to stop. It's not dissimilar across the country. There's other cities like ours that are experiencing the same issues. So, we want to nip this in the bud now.
Yeah, because the point is, it's not just this one particular case. I mean, how frequently is there dumped rubbish around the place, and how much is it costing the council to clear up afterwards?
So we have probably on average around 200 incidences of illegal dumping across the city. Like I said, that's not dissimilar to a city of our size across the country. And it costs our city and our ratepayers around $120,000 a year for the clean-up costs associated with that.
So what's the cost? What are the penalties if you get caught doing this?
So under the Litter Act, there is a $400 fine that we can pass on to people if we've got the evidence to do so. And we also have the ability to recover any costs associated with the clean-up or the investigation as well.
Right, so potentially hundreds of dollars, which brings me to the next question. And I know it depends on what you're dumping, but if you got a trailer load of stuff, if you took that to a council tip, roundabout, Tanya, how much would that cost you to get rid of it the proper way?
Oh, that's a good question, and off the top of my head, I couldn't actually tell you our fees and charges.
But potentially a hell of a lot less than getting pinged for dumping it in a back street behind the library.
Absolutely, yes. It's less. It would be less than $20 for a full trailer of household. But what we would actually encourage people to do is if you've got recycling or items that can be reused, we've got second-hand shops that will take really good second-hand goods, and we've got our recovery centre that will take recyclable goods such as electronics, cardboard, cans, glass, and things like that. So that's for free. So if you've got recyclables, you can get that for free. If it's just household rubbish, then that can go to landfill at a small cost.
So Tanya, is your feeling that generally the dumping of the rubbish is not a cost issue, it's a laziness issue?
That is my view. Yes. We've got a really good curbside collection, which we collect household rubbish, recycling, and food scraps. And if it's used properly, then we, a household can manage their household goods. And if people have got the motivation to take something and illegally dump it, then they just need to take it a little bit further and take it to the recovery centre for recycling or for landfill.
Appreciate your time, Tanya. That's Tanya Herman, who is from the Hamilton Council there. She's the Sustainable Resource Recovery Unit Manager, and they've had a guts full of people just dumping rubbish willy-nilly. We'll put a link in our story to the picture of the people that they are looking for. They would appreciate your help in identifying them. It is 25 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa e nai nei ko Anand Zaki. Okay, Anand. Investor confidence is rebounding. Who says?
Well, this seems to be an emerging trend of late. Markets are doing better this year and investors are feeling better as well. So the accounting body Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, they do an investor confidence survey every year, and they say sentiment is improving after a difficult 2022. So they surveyed about 500 retail investors, so your everyday investors, mostly holding more than $10,000 on the share market. That's on top of their other investments like their super. And basically, it's showing that there is some hope for the markets, remembering that 2022 was pretty tough when investor confidence basically nosedived as people were still worried about COVID and international politics. But this survey is giving some cause for optimism. So confidence in overseas capital markets is up 8%. Domestically, it's increased as well, but it's a bit more modest. And the survey also shows 56% are looking to increase the scale of their investment over the coming year, so want to put more money in. But despite that, there is always a but, despite that bit of good news, confidence isn't quite back to 2021 levels, and investors are now seeing interest rates as their biggest concern. But they say the thing about interest rates is that it's a bit easier for people to plan for higher rates than, say, pandemics and other international crises, which I think is a fair comment.
And on the economy has missed out on hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue. Oh, I'm buzzing in. Is this because businesses are making less than what they projected?
Well, basically weak tax laws, Lisa, and this is aimed at multinational corporations. So we have a report from a non-profit group that advocates for tax reform. They're called the Tax Justice Network. And they say basically the multinationals shifted about $2.5 billion earned in New Zealand overseas last year. And that's about $270 million in tax dollars that we're missing out on. We spoke to Tax Justice Aotearoa. They're an affiliate of the Global Network, and they told us that basically what a lot of people already suspect, that multinationals shift their profits around the world to minimise their tax bills. They think it's unfair profits, and they want to see more transparency on profit shifting and using tax havens, and they want to see tighter rules around it. And they say poor countries basically bear the brunt of profit shifting because that's money that can be used to improve their infrastructure. And the report called for an end to what they call global tax abuse, and they are recommending a UN tax convention to set up an independent body so that there are a global set of standards and rules for tax policy and law.
That is a lot of zeros, and wow, tax policy, isn't that controversial? Perhaps we'll be talking about this again. All right, let's take a spin around the markets.
Look, it was a slightly better day for the local share market after yesterday's fall. So when it closed, the top 50 index rose 21 points, or about 0.2%, to 11,955. Now, the attention of the world's markets will be on the US tomorrow morning, New Zealand time, because the US central bank, the Federal Reserve, they'll deliver their latest interest rate decision. Markets are hoping that it's the final rate rise in this current cycle. And just finally, the New Zealand dollar is at 62.2 US cents and 91.9 Australian.
Thank you, Anand. Anand Zaki there with Business News. The Australian and New Zealand governments have announced a task force to make travel between the two countries easier. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is in Wellington for bilateral talks and joined New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins in front of the media today. Our political reporter Giles Dexter joins us now. Giles, you needed a roadmap to work out what was actually being announced. What more can you tell us, please?
Well, the two countries have decided to create a roadmap to 2035, which is how they look to those next 10 years of those trans-Tasman relations. There'll be things around sustainability, biosecurity, Indigenous rights, but one of the interesting things that did come out of this discussion is that over the next year they will work towards making trans-Tasman movement easier, essentially creating a borderless system between Australia and New Zealand. So it could just be that you just hop on a plane in New Zealand, you don't even have to go through passport control when you reach Australia. Now, AUKUS did also come up, although not massive discussions. Of course, New Zealand is not willing to be part of that nuclear part. And now they're both here in the fan zone. They're just leaving now. They've just decided to pop down here for a quick beer, watch the football. Japan are beating Costa Rica 2-0. Now, tried to ask Anthony Albanese what he thought of a Steinlager. He's from Marrickville in Sydney, which is famous for its craft breweries. Not sure what he might have thought of some of the New Zealand beers, but it is all about renewing that friendship. It's 40 years since New Zealand and Australia signed that closer economic relations agreement. So it's all just about renewing the fact that we're just great pals.
Giles, I was fully engrossed in what you were saying, but I couldn't help notice behind the two Prime Ministers and their scarves, their football scarves, I felt they were being stalked by a giant bird. What was that went past? Did you notice it? A mascot of some sort?
That's the FIFA mascot, Tanuki. Oh, gosh. I did look this up on Wikipedia a few days ago. I believe she's a species of penguin that you can get in both Australia and New Zealand. So obviously we've both got our own sort of birds, and when we tried to come up with a bird that both of us had, that was the mascot for FIFA. Right. I'm not sure how the Prime Ministers both responded to a giant bird when they're used to being sort of stalked by political reporters, but might have made a welcome change for them.
OK, the Prime Minister's got another VIP in town tomorrow. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, Secretary of State of the US, Anthony Blinken, is in Wellington tomorrow. He'll only be meeting with the Prime Minister very, very briefly because Chris Hipkins is still committed to another day of meetings with Anthony Albanese. So Anthony Blinken is mostly here to meet with Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta, where they will be discussing just a range of bilateral things. He is actually mostly here for the FIFA World Cup. He's here to watch the US play the Netherlands tomorrow, but he will have a sit-down with Nanaia Mahuta. You can expect issues like the Asia-Pacific, China's presence in the Asia-Pacific, and AUKUS once again to come up.
Thank you for that, Giles. That is Giles Dexter joining us there from the fan zone where the Australian and New Zealand Prime Ministers were, along with a big bird that is apparently a mascot. Businesses near a central Auckland sinkhole fear what the future holds after it was announced repair work on the street could take 4 months. Diversions and detours are in place on the busy College Hill as the council rushes to stop the 3.5 metre long hole from growing further. Given how long other city roading projects are taking, some shop owners fear the sinkhole will be disrupting business for some time to come. Finn Blackwell has the story.
Behind road cones and construction barriers is the source of Auckland's latest headache. The College Hill sinkhole opened up on Monday, causing havoc for commuters and nearby businesses. There was already a plan to replace the century-old underground pipe beneath the road, but recent heavy rain proved too much for it to handle, and the pipe and surrounding ground gave way. Himanshu Bambani owns Cafe 28, located opposite the sinkhole. He's worried repairs will take longer than the estimated 4 months.
They have to fix as soon as possible. If they can do it's like a 4 months. They are saying on 4 months. I don't know how long it will be take. It's gonna be more than 4 months.
He says the construction site out front of his cafe is already causing all sorts of problems.
Yesterday I called to my insurance as well, and they said you have to prove us that's going on to happen with this one. But how can I prove the customer is not coming just because of this? How can I prove?
Across the road, Kauri Creek Cafe owner Andy Smith says he's also preparing for the long haul.
Obviously there's plenty of things underground there, and I don't know what else they might find which surprises them along the way. So whenever you hear 4 months, you straight away assume 6 months.
The cafe only opened 3 days ago, so the timing couldn't be worse.
It's a little bit devastating, of course, to have that eyesore in front of the cafe. It's not what people want to see when they're thinking time to go to a cafe. So you do wonder how many people it kind of sends in the other direction.
Like Himanshu, Andy Smith is figuring out how the sinkhole will impact things like deliveries.
Normally we have a loading zone right out front there, so that's nice and easy for deliveries. Obviously I am going to have to contact the companies that I'm getting deliveries from and arrange, at least let them know to park further up the hill or something or other.
At a press conference this afternoon, council staff tried to assure Aucklanders they're doing everything they could to fix the hole.
We're really sorry that this has happened, because we would have much preferred
the project to happen in a much more planned and systematic way. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case, so we're playing catch up now.
Head of Healthy Waters, Andrew Chin, says businesses on College Hill may be entitled to financial aid, although he doesn't think the work will have too much of an impact.
We'll be endeavouring to keep both sides of the street open, so we don't envisage that there should be any business loss for this, but if they can demonstrate they've been negatively impacted because of the construction, we'll absolutely consider it as part of the consent process.
On the street, this commuter says more roadworks are the last thing the city needs.
There's so much roadworks going on at the moment. It's really not good for the life of the city. So adding this on 4 months plus everything else that's going on, it's really not good.
Repairs on the underground pipe are expected to start in earnest on Monday. For now, it's another speed bump for city businesses, one many hope will be cleared quickly.
It is 5:45 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight. A lot of you getting in touch about the review of the forecasting system in Aotearoa. We'll get to some of that later in the program. If there's anything else that's caught your attention, do let us know. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz. And the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now with Anna.
Thanks, Lisa. The police search for Christchurch real estate agent Yanfei Bao has today focused on the Horswell River. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves has confirmed that the investigation is now a homicide inquiry. It's been a week since the 44-year-old mother was last seen. A 52-year-old man has been charged with kidnapping. National leader Christopher Luxon says a leak from Labour's closed-door caucus meeting yesterday is not surprising. It's reported a first-term MP told a private session they had been bullied and yelled at by former Cabinet Minister Kitty Allen, who is stepping down at the election after a car crash led to police charges. Mr Luxon says it's a sign the wheels have fallen off the government. The train service between Palmerston North and Wellington has been upgraded with 5 refurbished carriages set to come into operation from next Monday. The Capital Connection runs twice a day during the week, bringing around 250 commuters from along the Kapiti coast into the capital city. A study has found that Māori are a third more likely to be admitted to hospital with treatment injuries than non-Māori. Treatment injuries, also known as medical misadventure, include unintentional cuts and punctures during surgery. And the government of Ecuador has declared a state of emergency in all prisons in the country. It's authorised the armed forces to take control following a wave of violence. Those are the headlines, Lisa.
Nā mihi, Anna. Today marked a new beginning for the Capital Connection as 5 newly refurbished carriages were unveiled at Wellington train station. The train service runs twice a day between Palmerston and Wellington, Palmerston North and Wellington, bringing commuters from the Kapiti coast into the capital city. $26 million worth of government funding has guaranteed the future of the service, which many people have fought hard to keep. Jemima Houston reports.
The wind was cold and the sky was grey in the capital today, but the weather couldn't wipe the smiles off the faces of those who turned out to get a glimpse of the newly fitted Capital Connection carriages. Horizon's regional council's Jed Shirley told the crowd that securing the train service has been essential for the growing Manawatu-Wanganui region.
This is just a point in time and actually a launch pad to something way more exciting, which is going to be multiple services a day on a brand new set of rail stock that'll take us into the next 30 and 40 years.
5 carriages have been upgraded, with a 6th carriage set to be added in September to support an anticipated increase in passengers. More carriages are currently being upgraded at KiwiRail's Hutt workshops, with 11 in total eventually able to be used. Transport Minister David Parker says the refurbished carriages will tide the service over until brand new hybrid trains are brought onto the network within 5 years.
So these new refurbed coaches both increase the quality of what's available to people to use, but they also increase the quantity.
He says the entire $26 million project has been funded by the government's New Zealand Upgrade Programme. In terms of what the upgrade actually looks like inside, the new carriages on the Capital Connection are warm, comfortable and quiet. They're refurbished with new seats, new carpets, new tables, new bathrooms and a new cafe. Wheelchair access is available and a special area to store bikes has been included. People can also expect the ride to be much smoother than before, with improved suspension across the carriages. Kiwi Rail's Tracy Goodall says she's pleased to be able to offer a more comfortable service to commuters.
We're connecting close to 500 trips a day on our services, so bringing people from Palmerston North, Shannon, Otaki, like lots of different stops as well, along the way to be able to come to Wellington, the capital.
Green Party Transport spokesperson Julianne Genter campaigned hard to save the capital connection. She hopes to see the government work towards making public transport more affordable. Currently, a one-way ticket from Palmerston North on the capital connection is $35.
The government has the ability to invest in the services so people can pay lower prices for the fares, and that's essential if you want to have a truly accessible public transport network that gives people real choices.
The new Capital Connection carriages will be in service from next Monday. However, the train will not stop at Shannon because the height difference between the new carriages and the existing platform is a safety risk. Kiwi Rail says work to raise the platform at the Shannon stop will be completed within the next few months.
It is 9 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. 2 Greek Air Force pilots have died after a plane crashed while fighting wildfires on the Greek island of Evia. 3 days of mourning have been declared. The wildfires continue to rage across southern Europe, now sparking up in Sicily, Algeria and Tunisia. In Greece, more evacuation flights are taking place and more than 20,000 people have been evacuated from homes and resorts in recent days. The BBC's Jenny Hill reports.
Unrelenting, unforgiving, the fires are raging on. Firefighters battling to contain them, not just here on roads, but on the islands of Evia and Corfu too. It's desperate, dangerous work. This afternoon on Evia, a terrible reminder of the risks taken. A firefighting aircraft dumps its water, appears to clip a tree, and loses control. The 2 pilots on board were killed. So many are putting themselves in harm's way. Like volunteer firefighter Panagiotis, who takes us to see what this fire can do. His team's camping nearby, still on high alert. Their village is just down the road.
You can understand our anguish. We were running to put out the fire. We were desperate to save the forest, but we were also desperate to save our houses and our families.
When we came to the top of a nearby hill, the scale of the challenge became obvious. Up here, you really get a sense of how difficult the task is for firefighters. When we first arrived here, most of the smoke was coming from over there, but in the last few minutes, there's been a flare-up just down here. And of course, the strong wind is not only making things tougher for the people fighting the fires, but much more dangerous. This isn't the image this tourist island wants to project. Earlier, the Greek Prime Minister acknowledged that difficult days lie ahead. Which is why, even here, a birthday's worth celebrating, though the candles unlit.
You don't like the fire? No, we don't like the fire.
We only put out the fires, he jokes. We don't start them. Dark humour in sobering times.
An Otago schoolboy is the youngest ever winner of a prestigious Bravery Award for rescuing his brother in monster waves and freezing conditions at Crystal's Beach at Milton. The Royal Life-Saving Society gives the Mountbatten Medal to just one member of the Commonwealth a year for the most gallant rescue or attempted rescue. Last August, Kalia Kandaguda Gamaji and his younger brother were with their mum paddling at the water's edge when a wave swept 11-year-old Kithmi off his feet and out to sea. Kalia, who was 13 at the time, made the snap decision to swim about 60 metres out to him. He was given the award at a special assembly at Tokomairiro High School. I caught up with Principal Declan Sheridan and the hero of the moment, who remembers exactly what he said to his mum before jumping into the bitterly cold water.
I told my mother, I'm going to get my brother, but I might not be back.
Gosh.
I took off my jacket and my shoes. Then I jumped, and it was quite easy to get to hit me because the waves were going right into him. So he tried to grab me. Then I pushed him. Then I told him to grab my shoulders and my shirt. So we went to the shore safely.
Wow. Were you scared?
Yeah, I was. I thought I might die when I was dragging Kidney back because I drowned 1 or 2 times.
And the waves were big, and the beach is scary, I hear, that beach.
Yeah, it was scary, but the most part was it was cold.
And so when you got back onto the shore, were you very tired and cold?
Yeah, I was most partly I was cold.
What made you do that? What made you jump into the water to go get your brother?
I thought he might die because he was trying to float and he was kicking to the shore, tried to kick to the shore, come back, but he was going the wrong way. He went far and far, so I thought he might die, so I jumped.
You are so brave. You're so brave. And this medal that you've got, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Have you got it there? Can you hold it up for us so that we can see it?
Yeah.
Up a little bit higher for the camera. Wow. How do you feel about getting that?
I was surprised because I didn't know this was happening. And it is pretty cool. And there's my name on it as well, on the other side.
On the back?
Yeah, it's shiny and it is quite beautiful.
It is very beautiful. You should be super proud of that.
Yeah.
And saving your brother's life.
Yeah.
What did he say to you when you came out of the water together?
He said thank you because he was freezing. He didn't talk much.
I bet. I can understand that. And your principal's there with you. Wow,
Yeah.
You must be, your principal, Declan, you must be pretty proud of him.
Oh, we're very proud indeed. We've got school values and he meets all of them in spades. He's just the most wonderful student. He's very modest as well.
Absolutely, because that Mountbatten medal is pretty special, isn't it?
Yeah, 1 a year is awarded in the Commonwealth. So 2.4 billion people, I believe, and he's the only one to get one.
Flip. Tell us about that stretch of water. What do locals say about it?
It's notoriously dangerous stretch of water. The waves on the day were 3 metres high, okay, and there were several of them coming in. So Kithme and Kalya were new to the country. They'd only been here a month, so they were unfamiliar with the terrain and the conditions, so it caught them off guard.
How would you describe his actions on that day?
The word hero comes to the tongue really easily. He's worthy of that title. He's a wonderful young man.
And so what do all his classmates think of this?
Well, we had to keep it quiet, so they found out at the same time as Kithme. So we had an award ceremony on Monday, and he didn't know. He knew something was happening because he was sat on the front row, and all of a sudden he got this fantastic medal, and there were 40 invited guests there as well. So yeah, everybody's really proud. The whole school.
What does your mum think of what you did?
She is proud of me. She was so happy because she thought Kidney might not be back, so I just bring him back. So she was so happy.
And I bet she's proud of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you a very good swimmer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I spoke to his PE teacher. His PE teacher said they've not seen anybody swim as strong as him for a very long while.
Isn't that remarkable? Well deserved that medal. That was the Principal Declan Sheridan and Kalia Kandaguda Gamaji, who has won that Mountbatten medal for rescuing his own brother, a remarkable young man. A lot of you getting in touch about the Met Service and the weather review, generally thinking that the Met Service and NIWA should be merged together, be totally funded by the government and have the data freely available to all taxpayers.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, ko Anna Thomas tēnei. Police say the family of a missing Christchurch real estate agent are devastated. She is believed dead. 44-year-old mother Yanfei Bao was last seen door-knocking in the suburb of Wigram a week ago. Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves says the police have launched a homicide investigation and today have been searching the Hawesville River.
Probably the words that they most definitely did not want us to come and tell them. Devastated. They are being supported by police and victim support, and they have friends and family wrapped around them.
Detective Inspector Nicola Reeves says she believes Ms Bao was killed last Wednesday, July the 19th, between 12:30 in the afternoon and shortly before 11 o'clock at night. The police want any information about a silver Nissan Dualis, registration PKT 556, during that time frame. The long-running battle between two government-owned weather forecasters could be set for a shake-up. The system is to face yet another review. The Treasury and Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment will together investigate the country's weather setup and report back in February next year. Currently, Met Service and NIWA compete with each other and issue separate forecasts and data. The State-Owned Enterprises Minister Duncan Webb told Checkpoint that merging the two won't be ruled out.
At the end of the day, the question is, how can we be best prepared for a changing climate, for adverse weather, extreme events? And if that means merging, and that's the advice that comes this way, we'll have a very good look at it.
The Minister acknowledges there's tension in the relationship between NIWA and Met Service and that both agree there's room for improvement. National leader Christopher Luxon says he isn't surprised the details from Labour's closed-door caucus meeting yesterday have been leaked. The Post is reporting a first-term MP was visibly emotional during a frank discussion about MP Kitty Allen. The MP is reported to have been told the meeting they had been bullied and yelled at by Ms Allen, but thought it was the price to pay to get decent policy through. Labour's senior MPs are refusing to confirm the report, saying caucus discussions are confidential. Mr Luxon was asked if he thought it was problematic that details from the meeting had been leaked.
You know, the wheels have fallen off and, you know, this government's coming apart. And so, again, that's an issue for the Labour Party.
Deputy Prime Minister Carmel Sepuloni says she's confident Labour's caucus understands the need for discipline. A new study has found that Māori are a third more likely to be admitted to hospital with treatment injuries than non-Māori, and 43% are more likely to be admitted because of healthcare complications, Pōkere Paiwai reports.
The research reviewed hospital records from the Lakes and Bay of Plenty regions over 5 years, covering about 300 treatment injury patients and almost 14,000 people admitted with complications. They were all over 50 years old. Treatment injuries, also known as medical misadventure, include the likes of unintentional cuts and punctures during surgery, while healthcare complications include infections and reactions to medicine. Co-author Dr. Joanna Hikaka says the health system needs to respond effectively when there are differences in outcomes between different population groups. Te Whatu Ora has chosen a Fortune 500 company based in Ireland to implement the country's first ever national data platform for health. The fragmentation of data between hospitals, GPs and specialists has bedevilled the health system for years. Health NZ has awarded the huge new contract to Accenture, a recipient of many major consultant contracts with government departments. It says it's a significant milestone, but not what the deal is worth. It says for the first time, researchers and planners will be able to analyse health information in one location.
Prime Minister Chris Hipkins and his Australian counterpart have agreed to work towards seamless travel across the Tasman. During bilateral talks in Wellington today, the leaders agreed to put together a joint Australia-New Zealand expert group to scope initiatives to move closer towards easy travel. The group will report back by the end of June 2024. The leaders also discussed a commitment to refresh the Australia Aotearoa New Zealand Indigenous collaboration arrangement and deepen cooperation in the Pacific. Separately, the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will arrive in New Zealand this evening and will meet briefly with Mr Hipkins tomorrow. Thousands of people have been evacuated from coastal communities in the Philippines as Typhoon Doksuri sweeps through the region. It's been called a super typhoon and is likely to hit China later in the week. Our correspondent Patrick Fogg reports.
Reports say Doksuri is packing top wind speeds of nearly 140 miles per hour. It's cut power to much of Cagayan province in the Philippines. Authorities still have to assess damage to farms and infrastructure. The typhoon is forecast to leave Philippine waters on Thursday morning before heading across the Taiwan Strait and onto Fujian in China. Taiwan suspended annual military drills because of the storm. China, meanwhile, has ordered fishing boats in Fujian to find refuge and told farmers to harvest their rice and other crops as quickly as they can.
And water temperatures around Florida's coast have risen to 38 degrees Celsius, about the same temperature as a hot tub. Experts say multiple reefs around Florida Keys are bleached and they expect complete mortality of the bleached reefs in just a week. Director and senior scientist at the Florida Aquarium, Kerry O'Neill, told CNN that would be akin to all of the trees in the rainforest dying. And that's the news.
After 1pm on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan, every epic film begins with an epic story, and they don't get any bigger than the man who developed and helped deploy the world's first atomic bomb. The story of J. Robert Oppenheimer is told in the Pulitzer Prize-winning book American Prometheus by Martin Schuon and Kai Bird. I'll speak to Kai about remembering the consequences of what we create when he joins me on Afternoons from 1pm here on RNZ National.
Another short forecast from Met Service until midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, also Coromandel, Taupo and Taumaranui. Showers easing this evening and fine breaks increasing. Showers increasing tomorrow morning with isolated thunderstorms possible. For the Bay of Plenty, a few showers tomorrow. Whanganui and Kapiti, mainly fine. Showers developing tomorrow morning, some heavy with possible thunderstorms. Taihape, Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington. Showers, some heavy. Snow above 700 metres. Nelson, Bulla and Westland, mainly fine. Showers developing tonight, some possibly thundery, clearing tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough, Canterbury and North Otago, mostly fine. The odd shower at times, rain developing about North Canterbury and southern Marlborough tomorrow night with snow above 600 metres. The remainder of Otago, Fiordland and Southland, cloud increasing, occasional rain or showers from this evening, some heavy with thunderstorms possible about Fiordland. Snow lowering to 500 metres overnight. And for the Chatham Islands, showers easing tomorrow. RNZ National, it is coming up to 8 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint and Lisa Owen.
Kia ora rā e ho. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. New Zealand and Australia are setting up a joint expert task force to make movement across the Trans-Tasman border easier. The announcement comes during Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's first official visit to Aotearoa. Our political reporter Annika Smith filed this report from the capital.
A porphyry on arrival to Parliament before heading straight into the debating chamber.
I'm sure that members would wish to welcome the Honourable Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia.
It's the first time an Australian Prime Minister has been in the chamber since Julia Gillard addressed New Zealand's Parliament more than a decade ago. The Trans-Tasman relationship has always been close, but has tightened in recent months, with both countries fielding Labour leaders. In April, Albanese announced sweeping changes making it easier for Kiwis living in Australia to become citizens and to vote and receive benefits. A long-fought battle that still feels fresh.
I want to thank, in this House, Prime Minister Albanese and his government for making that possible.
Also made possible today, a joint expert group to scope out how to make trans-Tasman travel easier without compromising security. Both leaders intent on finding workable measures to simplify the border.
We've asked that working group to report back by the 30th of June next year on additional steps that we can take to continue to improve that pathway.
Two-way travel links our people and drives economic opportunities, and that's why we want to make this a much more seamless experience.
A show of unity, but behind all the pomp and ceremony lie serious questions. There's pressure on New Zealand to increase its defence spending as it sits out in the cold of AUKUS on account of its nuclear-free status. After a recent visit by high-ranking White House official Kurt Campbell, Defence Minister Andrew Little indicated New Zealand was willing to explore joining the second pillar of AUKUS, comments that were later somewhat walked back by Hipkins. Speaking today, Mr Little says there's still a long way to go.
My understanding from other Australian ministers is that the thinking about AUKUS Pillar 2 is very undeveloped, and so I'm not expecting any particular discussions anytime soon.
The opposition leader Christopher Luxon largely on the same page, with the assurance he has no intention of adjusting New Zealand's nuclear-free policy.
Absolutely not.
New Zealand and Australia are at the centre of the world stage right now as they co-host the FIFA Women's World Cup. It's drawn another high-profile dignitary, the United States' top diplomat, Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Mr Blinken is meeting with Foreign Affairs Minister Nanaia Mahuta on his Pacific tour, while also supporting the US in its match against the Netherlands tomorrow. With the world event on our doorstep, there's plenty of sporting diplomacy to go round. Chris Hipkins and Anthony Albanese grabbed a beer in the FIFA fan zone on the Wellington waterfront ahead of a state dinner this evening.
Well, let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about the review of weather forecasting in Aotearoa, specifically around the Met Service and NIWA. The minister there saying he's not ruling out the two organisations merging if it would give them efficiencies and a better service. Stuart's got in touch to say, I'm a farmer and a boatie. Most like me don't use either Met Service or NIWA for short-term forecasts. The Norwegian Weather Office and their YR app is the most reliable for localised New Zealand forecasts. Many countries have outsourced their Met Service to them for good reason, says Stuart. Johann's also got in touch saying the government should merge the Met Service and NIWA, even though they have different functions in providing weather and climate advice to the public and the government itself. Someone else agrees that they should come together under an umbrella agency, and that should be a new oceans agency. This one from Matthew says, given up on the government weather forecasters, Philip Duncan at Weatherwatch is where it's at for relevant and well-explained weather forecasting. And this one too, saying pretty simple. NIWA is overfunded and should stop wasting taxpayer funds duplicating weather forecasting services. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. 3 days of mourning have been declared in Greece after a plane with 2 Air Force pilots on board crashed while fighting fires. Wildfires are continuing to spread in southern Europe, with blazes burning on the Italian island of Sicily and the Greek resort islands of Rhodes, Corfu and Evia. Here's the ABC's Stephen Canan.
Choppers and planes doused water on a hilltop near Gennady Beach as fires continued to spread across the island of Rhodes. It's been estimated that at least 10% of the land area has burned here in recent days, as hundreds of firefighters have battled blazes that have been difficult to control due to intense weather conditions. Volunteer Stavros Nikotaris says his people need more planes.
Airplanes. People we have, you see, they have a lot of people, but we can't do anything with this fire. It's not possible for a human to do anything with this big fire. So now they need planes, and there are only 5.
On the Greek island of Rhodes, over 20,000 people have been evacuated from the pathway of the fires. Among them is Melbourne man Kyriakos Peristoridis, who has been on a working holiday here and was evacuated from the hotel he was working at in Kiatari. AM caught up with him when he returned to the devastated village.
Absolutely glad I'm evacuated, yeah, absolutely. Like, look at the state of it. I cannot imagine what the fire, the intensity would have been like. For me, it's reminiscent of seeing, maybe not to the exact extent, but to the 2019 fires that we had in eastern Victoria. Before the fire hit, the sky was black. There was smoke everywhere, ash everywhere, people wearing masks and blankets over their faces to try and not breathe in so much smoke and ash.
The 29-year-old, who has a large extended family on the island, says the locals are used to bushfires, but not of the scale of this one.
This is the worst bushfire that they've had on this island in, I think they were talking about 50 years or something like that. And it's the largest evacuation of tourists they've had to do in Greece ever on one of the islands that I'm aware of.
You obviously love this place and have a connection to it with your family.
Yeah.
Are you worried about what this might mean for tourism for this place?
Absolutely worried about tourism. You know, for a lot of the Greek islands, tourism is the lifeblood of people, you know. A lot of them don't work over the winter period. The summer period is where they get all their income from. And then they go back to their villages and enjoy the winter with their families and stuff. You know, it's absolutely horrendous that this has happened.
A court in Belgium has convicted 6 men of murder for their role in the Islamist bombings in Brussels in 2016. 32 people were killed and more than 300 were injured when a metro train in Brussels airport were targeted by suicide bombers. World Watch's Charlie Drever compiled this report.
Brussels airport. The air thick with dust and smoke as people try to comprehend what happened just moments prior. A metro station was also bombed, and soon after the reports came flooding in of mass casualties.
We have seen people who are really injured, a mum with a newborn baby, a mum with little children, a man who was lying on the floor.
ISIS claimed responsibility for the attacks, the same cell responsible for the attacks in Paris just months prior. Combined, they were the deadliest operation on European soil by the Islamic State. And now, 7 years on, 6 men have been found guilty of terrorist murder and 2 others have been convicted for taking part in terrorist activities. New York Times reporter Monica Pronchuk was at the court.
The victims of these attacks waited over 7 years for the trial but what happened is a jury, they had to reply to 287 questions, including detailed motivations of their verdict.
As the BBC's Paul Kirby explains, several of those on trial had already been convicted of taking part in the Paris terror attacks.
Chief among these 6 are Salah Abdeslam and Mohamed Abrini. Salah Abdeslam was the only survivor of the Paris attacks in November, just 4 months before the Brussels bombings. He fled to Brussels immediately after the Paris attacks. So he's been found guilty of that. He actually denied any involvement at all in the Brussels bombings because he was arrested just a few days earlier.
Philippe Vanderberger, who was at the airport at the time of the attacks, welcomed the verdict.
I'm very happy, very calm. It was a good end. 2 acquitted and the others found guilty. It's very reassuring. I can be proud of what the jurors have done.
The court also ruled that another 3 people who died in the years following the bombings should be considered victims of the attacks, bringing the death toll to 35. They included Chante Decourt, who suffered years of unbearable psychological illness before she died by euthanasia last year. Xavier Legrand died of cancer in 2017 after being forced to halt treatment because of the wounds caused by the metro bombing. And Matthew Fisher took his life in 2021 after suffering years of post-traumatic stress.
It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. China's Foreign Minister Xinjiang has been removed from his post. He's not been seen in public for several weeks and the ruling party has been silent about his absence. Chinese state media announced last night he'd been replaced by his predecessor. Journalist Fabian Kretscher told the ABC it's very curious.
In my opinion, this is easily one of the most spectacular news stories coming out of China. The foreign minister just disappears for more than a month, and really nobody has a clue what is happening behind the facade. Even the spokesperson of the ministry during their daily press conferences, they first explain that there's a health concern. Then they say we just simply don't have any information. They act nervous. They don't know what's going on. And the speculation, the rumors are really thriving also on social media here in China. And not everything is censored. So we know, for example, many users have been speculating that Xinjiang has an extra-martial affairs. Some would think that there might be a corruption case. We really don't know. And there was also no official explanation given today when he was removed from post. But I would say it's quite safe to assume that this is not or has nothing to do with illness, but this is a political case. Why? Because right now, if you go to the homepage of the foreign ministry, of the Chinese foreign ministry, then you see that all previous mentions, remarks, references of Xinjiang are being removed. So he's basically purged. And this is very, very rare. I mean, Xinjiang was basically a rising star within the Communist Party. He was also seen as a protege of head of state Xi Jinping. So really very an extraordinary case, and probably the official explanation what really happened will follow later.
Just like New Zealand, Queensland is grappling with a youth crime issue. One part of the police force there is trying a different approach, aiming to intervene in the lives of the teenagers committing crimes to stop them doing it again. The two-people teams, made up of a police officer and a youth justice worker, don't wear uniforms or drive a marked car, and they're on call 24 hours a day. The ABC's Stephanie Smale joined one of the teams on a night patrol.
It's 10:30pm and Senior Constable Ben Oldham and Youth Justice Worker Matt Goldsmith have hours of driving ahead of them.
So we're at the Inala Civic Centre at the moment. It's a transport area, so we tend to do patrols through these sorts of areas where youth can congregate, and we can hop out the car and just start chatting with them. The longer they're out, the sort of more trouble they can probably get into later.
Are kids still out in these chillier nights?
They're definitely still around, which is sad.
Because there's been some pretty cold nights.
It's quiet tonight, though, as they patrol a big area from Brisbane's CBD south, checking in with security companies and other police teams as they go.
I'm just giving you a call to see if there's been any dramas with any young people tonight. We're 24 hours, our phone's always on. I emphasise with our clients and families to please give us a call. We're happy to come take you out of that situation and drop you home.
Do you guys do that? Do they ring you? And
we have had families ring us. Mums of offenders ring us.
And it's constant contact too, it's not just the once-off.
one of their stops is an inner-city park where people are sleeping in tents under a bridge. Senior Constable Oldham says they're trying to find a teenage girl who they've heard spends time here.
In relation to some court matters coming up, and just ask them, can we help? Like, they don't need to be sleeping down there.
Matt Goldsmith explains the youth co-responder teams are trying to find out why young people are committing crimes and help them to stop by connecting them with services like drug and alcohol rehabilitation or psychological support. He acknowledges Queensland's string of serious crimes involving teenagers and admits it can be hard to measure the outcomes of their work with statistics.
It's really hard to see the success of prevention. You can't get a statistic on prevention, so it's a long game.
We can't arrest our way out of this problem that's happening with the young people, and not that we condone anything that they're doing. What we're saying is that there's got to be a starting point because it can only ever get better.
Ben Oldham says he is seeing results from this new policing strategy.
14-year-old male. He was committing any offences from shop stealings to unarmed robberies, anywhere from one offence in a day to probably a couple of offences in a day. Went into police custody. We just identified that he just needed a bit of a push in the right direction. from that, he hasn't offended in over a month now, from us listening to some of his needs and identifying what the problems were.
What sort of problems?
He has some learning difficulties, so just not fitting in at school, along with it's a single mother home. She has to work long hours and sometimes she can't be there.
Teams like Senior Constable Oldham and Matt Goldsteins are now operating in 12 other police districts in Queensland, including Mount Isa, Cairns and Rockhampton.
Police in Scotland will now be allowed to keep their beards and moustaches after new rules requiring them to be clean-shaven were put on hold. The decision by the authorities was made after health and safety advice and consultation with staff, some of whom were not very happy about the idea. The BBC's Katie Hunter has more.
Police Scotland said it wanted frontline officers and staff to be clean-shaven so they could wear fitted face masks in case they were attending fires or chemical accidents. There would have been some exemptions for religious or medical reasons. But the force announced a date to introduce the policy before it had carried out a consultation. The Scottish Police Federation, which represents rank-and-file officers, said it had been inundated with complaints. Police Scotland has now postponed the policy and said it would further examine the evidence base for it. The Federation's General Secretary David Kennedy welcomed that decision and said the plans weren't proportionate or popular.
People's beards are their own identity. It's akin to saying to somebody you're going to have to shave off all your hair because of health and safety. And that's probably one of the issues that a lot of people had with it. So we'd hope after this time that they will now look at it properly and come to a proportionate decision if they have to introduce a policy like this.
4 male police officers took legal action against Police Scotland after they were told to shave their beards last year, before the policy was announced. The BBC understands these cases have now been settled, but the force said it was unable to comment. Police Scotland's facial hair policy will now be reviewed in 12 months' time.
Now to the top of Australia, where a group of friends is about to set off on a daring world record attempt in Darwin. They're attempting to set the record for the longest, deepest drive underwater in a 1978 Land Cruiser. Who knew? The ABC's Jane Barden reports.
On Darwin's Casuarina Beach, Tom Lawrence and his friends unload what was a clapped-out old four-wheel drive from a flatbed truck.
So we bought this car for $5,000. We took the old motor out and we've put a new electric motor in, and then we've waterproofed that electric motor using what's known as an oil compensation system.
How is the car physically going to be driven across the harbour?
There's going to be 30 different divers who will take turns at driving the vehicle. Because of the different depths we're going to, there's different amount of times each diver can drive the vehicle for. We've got a dive boat above that has an umbilical cord that will go down to the divers so they can breathe.
They're following the same route as the current world record holders for the longest, deepest drive underwater. Another group of Darwin locals who had to abort their attempt to cross the harbour 40 years ago after getting stuck on a rocky ledge halfway. Matt Mitchell, who owns a commercial diving company, has recruited volunteer diver drivers from all over Australia. He's surveyed and plotted the 7-kilometre route in the harbour's notoriously murky water.
We're going to have communications plus a sonar mounted to the front of the vehicle, which gives us a 3D map out to the 30 metres in front of us. So even we've got no visibility, we can still see. Back when they did it 40 years ago, they were just flying blind.
What are some of the new obstacles that you have to look out for?
So there's export gas pipelines. There's also the 2 power cables that go to Waggett Beach, and obviously the crocodiles as well. But I think the sharks ate them all, so we might be right.
Tom Lawrence says the deaths on an Ocean Gate submersible diving the Titanic in June haven't deterred them.
All of a sudden, there became this extra level of interest, hey, are you guys going to be okay? But the Titanic is so much further down. I think it's at about 3,000 metres, whereas we're going to 30.
The friends want to show off Darwin's frontier spirit.
Everyone yearns for the glory days when it was really the land of the free up here. And, now people can sit in their posh cafes and think that, people are still driving under the harbour.
Locals lined up on the beach to watch approve.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's exactly what we need. It's just be a little bit naughty. That's what we like about living in Darwin.
Salvage and rescue experts Luke Purdy and Taylor Smith are at the wheel for the first submerging.
But yeah, I think we just get out there and see what happens. I think it's going to do a great job. I don't feel we're going to have a problem at all.
Well, the guys have just driven the car down the sand. They've launched into the water. The water's up to the chassis. Boats following behind with the umbilical air cord. And I can only see heads above the window now, almost submerged. And they're under.
It looks like it's going well, yeah. You got the whole car's underwater. Yeah, everything looks like it's going well so far.
The sea trial is declared a success, and so it's all systems go for Saturday.
Yeah, no words on that one. But before we go, the last word goes to this person with feedback on our Young Mountbatten award. It's a bravery award. He saved his brother, he's 13 years old at the time, from a very cold Otago beach. Love the story and video of the boy who saved his bro and the sparkly medal with his name on it. So do we. And if you want to check out the video, it will be on our webpage. He was an absolute delight, wants to be an engineer too. The Late News team is going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify or Apple. And tomorrow from 5 a.m. on First Up, they are on the picket line with cleaners who say it's not possible for them to get by on the minimum wage. Make sure you tune in for that one, 5 a.m.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. Police have been searching the Horsewell River as part of the homicide investigation into missing Christchurch real estate agent Yanfei Bao. A 52-year-old man has been charged with kidnapping the married mother who was last seen a week ago, and police do not rule out more charges. The future of government-owned competing weather forecasters Met Service and NIWA is under review. The state-owned enterprises Minister Duncan Webb told Checkpoint a merger won't be ruled out. Sticking with the weather, water temperatures around Florida's coast have risen to 38 degrees Celsius, about the same temperature as a hot tub. And US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is arriving in New Zealand this evening. He'll meet briefly with the Prime Minister Chris Hipkins tomorrow. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather at 7.
This morning on First Up, how to make a buck in tough times. A young entrepreneur told me how his car wash business is cleaning up.
I'm 20 years old. I started less than a year ago, so to have a six-figure business at 20 years old with an employee is no words, really.
Sticking with revenue, David Parker is no longer the minister after the Prime Minister dumped his wealth tax. So I asked the Greens if Parker is in the wrong party.
Well, he did say that he was a loyal Labour Party member, but there's nothing stopping him to party vote Green to get a wealth tax on the table make government.
Download First Up the podcast or join me, Nathan Rarity, weekday mornings, live from 5 on RNZ National.
And you're listening to Trending Now. On the detail tonight, should the media be self-censoring its court reporting of the Dickerson triple murder trial as the gory details unfold?
Kia ora, I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Today on The Detail.
A warning, this story contains details...
A warning, this story contains details that could disturb some viewers.
A warning, our story contains graphic and distressing details about the children.
And a warning, this story contains distressing content.
They are the words that alert listeners, readers and viewers about what's coming next. And they are coming up almost on a daily basis with the murder trial of Lauren Dickerson over the killings of her 3 daughters.
She denies the charges, pleading insanity and infanticide. The South African family had only been in Timaru for a week when the killings happened. New work colleagues and friends have been giving evidence in the High Court in Christchurch. Neva Chittick was there, and a warning this story contains distressing content.
But critics say the warnings are not enough. They are calling the coverage gratuitous, obscene, salacious.
Some of the levels of detail about exactly what this mother did to her children to end their lives, it doesn't help anyone.
So when does information for the public good turn into torture porn? And what about the individual's responsibility to pick and choose?
There's a media smorgasbord out there, and you can binge on the smorgasbord, or you can just take a few chips and a few shrimps, and regulate yourself to a certain extent.
More from news boss Richard Sutherland soon, and we'll hear from court blogger Jake Kenny. First though, torture porn and bonkers are how documentary maker David Farrier describes our coverage of the Lauren Dickerson trial. And that's from someone who's been living in LA where, quite frankly, live news is over the top.
I think the same thing. I mean, when I think America, I always think of the police car chases that are live streamed for everyone to watch. That's sort of, that's the extreme example of it. You're watching every second of a car crash, and that might crash at the end and everyone might die, or that, the police might catch them. That's sort of what you think of with America. But yeah, in New Zealand, it just seems to be, especially with this most recent trial, even a delight in the way the facts are delivered. And I think of sort of the rise of true crime podcasts and true crime documentaries on the likes of Netflix, or even dramatizations like, the Jeffrey Dahmer dramatization on Netflix, where it's more than just reporting the facts, it's kind of delivering them and the sordid details that are of no particular use to the public, sort of delivering them in a way which is really attention grabbing and ways to gleefully kind of draw you into some of the sordid details. And it's those sordid details that are just on high repeat. I mean, you can't avoid stuff at the moment without another headline from this current trial of things that are just really emotive and extreme and clearly just there, in my opinion, for clicks.
You talk about in your article that we've got a bonkers approach to crime reporting and the level of graphic detail we revel in. Are you talking about the media here?
Yes, I am. I've noticed a few outlets here online and on the 6 p.m. news just leaning into some of the really extreme details. And it's complicated to talk about because I'd love to give you some examples of things I've heard, but I don't want to do that now. I mean, in my webworm piece, I sort of boiled down a couple of key details that I thought were really shocking to be distributed at the 6 p.m. news as people are eating their dinner. And in doing that, I had a bunch of readers write to me and say, oh, look, we didn't need to hear that even in your newsletter. And I agree, like some of the